Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. My video output has been a little bit spotty for the last week, and I apologize. It's just been a little crazy. Obviously, I was traveling. Uh, then I came back into town and just had a monumental day of things that I had to take care of when I got home because so many things fell by the wayside while I was gone. And then last night I was in a super doomer video chat with a whole bunch of people. Jennifer Hines, Torstein, Sandy from Environmental Coffee House, Lord Hugh, and Hambone. And we were discussing lighting the fuse on the debt bomb and crashing industrial civilization that way. I don't know if you guys checked it out, but it's on the Going South channel, on Torstein's channel. If you would like to go check out that conversation, the conversation being, should we go ahead and do this? Right now, I just think, personally, I think we should be doing everything, taking all action, taking all roads, trying all things, trying all paths in order to raise awareness. And in at the end of the meat of the conversation yesterday that we had, I got basically the feeling that this is a good thing to do. Maybe if it doesn't work to blow up industrial civilization or take it down, and it probably might not, but who knows? That the main thrust would be another avenue for raising awareness. Everything that people are doing is raising awareness. Ocasio-Cortez introducing a Green New Deal, Extinction Rebellion blocking streets and bridges and roads in London. There are so many people, people making videos, people, going out, speaking on lecture tours, people writing books. The awareness is leveling up. The awareness is raising, and this is a really good time to get into the flow and get into the momentum that is happening. To what end? I don't know. Are we going to actually find a solution? Are we going to actually make it out of the bottleneck? I don't know. But I encourage the discussion, at the very least, the discussion is fine. I also brought up in the video that I think doing a weekly gas strike in conjunction with the school strike, the climate change school strike, that is a global phenomenon. And I think that we should do a global gas strike in conjunction with the global school strike on Fridays. So I'm going to go ahead and start trying to do that. It's going to be something I'm going to do on social media, on all my channels. It probably shouldn't take me very long to set up. So possibly next week we could start it. So that's going to be my contribution to the action that we can take, that we can rally ourselves around. And if we have a one-day fuel strike once a week, it doesn't really put people at an inconvenience, because obviously you can buy gas the day before. And it's only one day. You can make it through one day without buying gas. But the point is to maybe, ask people to see, demand to see empty gas stations. I want to see a bunch of empty pumps out there, empty gas stations, devoid of cars. Just boycott the gas stations for one day a week. And again, the thrust of this, it could economically hurt the fossil fuel companies on some level. If it gets big enough, if it goes wide enough, if it goes global enough, sure. But actually the main thrust of this is raising awareness not only around climate change, but the reality of where we're at with climate change. So it's just another avenue to put information out there. And so I'm gonna be working on this, and I will keep you guys abreast. So I just got back from Detroit, and an interesting thing was happening back there, and also all over the Midwest, and also in Canada. There has been major flooding going on in the last month. In Detroit, a lot of the freeways and roads were shut down from flooding, and I had never seen it like that. And I was hanging out with people that had grown up their whole lives in Detroit, and they were like, "I've never seen this happen before." We are clearly reaching a tipping point where extreme weather, climate change, weather catastrophes, climate catastrophes are going to start getting in the way of business as usual. If Extinction Rebellion or other people don't put themselves in the way of business as usual, the weather is going to be doing that for us as we go through this year. It's very likely that this year could be the ice-free Arctic year. Maybe, if not, then that really puts a high percentage on next year being the year that we first see a blue ocean event. So, whatever it is that you're doing, however it is that you're conducting your business, wherever you're living, however you're getting along, try and keep that in mind. What's happening is weather disruptions, extreme weather events are going to start causing a lot of problems for people. So you really start having to, we have to start living with that in mind. What happens if the power goes out? What happens if we get flooded out? What happens if there's a wildfire that comes through our town? Any of these things seem to be very likely at any moment. So I'm going to go through a couple articles and try not to be too long today. I try. I'm not always successful. I'm going to start with an article from The Guardian by Roger Hallam. Now we know conventional campaigning won't prevent our extinction. I helped to found Extinction Rebellion because only nonviolent civil disobedience will stop the destruction of our natural world. And this is from May 1st, 2019, so a few weeks ago. Or 1 week ago, excuse me. I don't know what day it is. The fact of the matter is finally settled, not the fact that if we do not stop putting carbon into the atmosphere, our children will starve. That was settled 3 decades ago. Rather, that the only way to prevent our extinction is through mass participation, civil disobedience, thousands of people breaking the laws of our governments until they are forced to take action to protect us. In less than a year, Extinction Rebellion has gone from 15 people in a room to creating the biggest organized civil disobedience campaign in British history. In the past 2 weeks, more than 1,000 people have been arrested, and as a result, the climate and ecological crisis is finally on the political agenda. Everyone from the Labour Party to the Sun newspaper is accepting we are right. We face the destruction of the next generation unless immediate emergency action is taken. For millions of people this week, the penny has finally dropped. This is real, and it's terrifyingly serious. Even Michael Gove says he is hearing the message and held a meeting with XR on Tuesday. None of this was unplanned. Extinction Rebellion didn't come out of the blue. 2 years ago, a group of researchers and activists started to meet to seriously consider 2 questions. Why has campaigning failed so catastrophically, I can read, over the past generation, and how can we make it work? There are no more important questions facing our society and the global community. Drawing on the groundbreaking research of Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stephan, Why Civil Resistance Works, we came to the conclusion that the only way to overcome entrenched political power is through extensive campaigns of large-scale nonviolent direct action. In January this year, I produced a 30-page paper for XR which formed the basis of the strategy of the past 2 weeks of mass disruption in London. The document has now been made into a booklet. The strategy is based upon 3 observations. Firstly, that only through disruption, the breaking of laws, do you get the attention you need. Secondly, only through sacrifice, the willingness to be arrested and go to prison, do people take seriously what you are saying. And thirdly, only through being respectful to ourselves, the public, and the police do we change the hearts and minds of our opponents, which makes it easier for them to negotiate with us. Specifically, the strategy. The civil resistance model, as we call it, needs to involve several key elements in order for successful outcomes to be optimized. Firstly, you need a lot of people. Thousands need to be involved. You need to go to the capital city because that is where the rich and powerful are. The government, big business, and the media. You need to break the law, sit in the road, or glue yourself to the entrance of a building and such like. Unlike A to B marches, this is what gets attention. You have to stay strictly nonviolent. Indulging in violence and aggressive language excludes vulnerable groups, the old and young, from participation. Crucially, it has to go on day after day. Like a labor strike, you have to impose economic and reputational damage on the opponent over an extended period. Finally, it has to be fun. Many more people are attracted to celebratory cultural spaces than narrowly political ones. Of course, this does not always guarantee success, but it is vastly more likely to do so than the alternatives. In the real world, you have a limited number of options to choose from and a limited amount of time in which to choose. Conventional campaigning, sending emails, payments to NGOs, and more reports is not going to stop the outrageous destruction of our natural world. It is not going to stop our children entering the hell of social breakdown. It's time to get real. We need agreement on what works on the basis of the social science, just as we insist on following the natural science on the climate crisis. Nothing written here is new. Extinction Rebellion is humbly following in the tradition of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. We are simply rediscovering what people do when they have had enough of failure and really want to make a difference. Dozens of people have come to tell me they have just had the best week of their lives, and that highlights maybe the most important findings of social science, that after covering basic material needs, human beings are not made happier through consuming more stuff. Meaning and happiness, a sense of wholeness and calm, come from engaging with others as a community and making the world a better place. Instead of living the lie that there is nothing we can do, we now have a pathway to effective action. Go out with others and break the law. Let's get on it while there's still time. I dig it. He gets right to the point. And, whether you agree or not that this is the best way to take action, they certainly are making great strides. It also helps that we have an escalating climate crisis happening all over the world. It's starting to get just so obvious, and I think that's part of the reason why so many people are going, oh, yes, okay. Seems like it's a problem. Let's do something about it. Moving on, Ireland becomes second country to declare climate emergency. This is from today. Ireland has become only the second country in the world to declare a climate and biodiversity emergency. The development came after a Fianna Fáil, I don't know how to pronounce these words, amendment to the Oireachtas report on climate action was accepted by both the government and opposition parties without a vote. Chair of the Climate Action Committee, Fine Gael's Hildegard Naughton, welcomed the outcome as an important statement, but added, now we need action. She said Minister for Climate Action Richard Bruton would speedily return to the dial with new proposals, and she looked forward to working with all parties and none to scrutinize them. Green Party leader Eamon Ryan also welcomed the development, but warned that declaring an emergency means absolutely nothing unless there's action to back it up. That means the government having to do things they don't want to do. Deputy Brid Smith of Solidarity, People Before Profit, said she was delighted with the declaration, but added it will be interesting to see if the government will support her climate emergency measures bill next month, which seeks to limit oil and gas exploration. The Fianna Fáil amendment was moved by and I'm sure somebody's going to correct me on my pronunciation, but please help me out, was moved by the party's climate action spokesman, Timmy Dooley. However, when the vote came to, before the House, it was put forward by Deputy Ryan as there were only 6 TDs in the chamber and none of them were from Fianna Fáil. The Green Party leader observed, "We have declared a climate emergency in our own Irish way. The issue of biodiversity emergency is to be considered by a citizens' assembly." The 16-year-old climate change activist Greta Thunberg has warmly welcomed Ireland declaring a climate emergency. She tweeted tonight, "Great news from Ireland. Who is next?" Moving on to this interesting piece of news, the wettest 12 months in U.S. history were the last 12 months in U.S. history. The 12 months ending in April 2019 were the wettest year-long period in the U.S. In U.S. records going back to 1895. According to the monthly U.S. climate summary issued Wednesday by the NOAA National Centers for Environmental Information, averaged across the contiguous U.S., the total of 36.20 inches made the period from May 2018 to April 2019 the first year-long span ever to top 36 inches. The old record for any 12-month period was 35.78 inches from April 2015 to March 2016. That wasn't so long ago. Given the fierce drought-related impacts of the 2010s, including multiple deadly wildfire disasters from Tennessee to California, it may seem a bit counterintuitive the nation has actually been getting wetter overall. Well, hard to believe, but it's actually raining here in LA, and it's been raining, and it's going to rain some more. It's been extremely wet and rainy in Los Angeles, unseasonably so, and oddly so. I mean, this is more rain than we usually ever get. So it's hitting the entire country. Across the contiguous U.S., average yearly precipitation has risen by about 2 inches over the past century, from around 29 inches to just over 31. For the entire nation, including Alaska and Hawaii, precipitation increased by about 4% in the period from 1901 to 2015. And we are getting more rain, more floods, more 100-year floods, more 500-year floods, more 1,000-year floods. Lastly, I'm going to cover this article from Rolling Stone. A study says U.S. fossil fuel subsidies exceed Pentagon spending. That's a lot of subsidies. This is from yesterday. The world would be richer and healthier if the full costs of fossil fuels were paid, according to a new report from the International Monetary Fund. The United States has spent more subsidizing fossil fuels in recent years than it has on defense spending, according to a new report from the International Monetary Fund. The IMF found that direct and indirect subsidies for coal, oil, and gas in the U.S. reached $649 billion in 2015. Pentagon spending that same year was $599 billion. The study defines subsidy very broadly, as many economists do. It accounts for the differences between actual consumer fuel prices and how much consumers would pay if prices fully reflected supply costs, plus the taxes needed to reflect environmental costs, and other damage, including premature deaths from air pollution. These subsidies are largely invisible to the public and don't appear in national budgets. But according to the IMF, the world spent $4.7 trillion, or 6.3% of global GDP in 2015 to subsidize fossil fuel use, a figure it estimated rose to $5.2 trillion in 2017. China, which is heavily reliant on coal and has major air pollution problems, was the largest subsidizer by far at $1.4 trillion in 2015. That's 1 year. But the U.S. ranked second in the world. The human, environmental, and economic toll of these subsidies is shocking to the conscience. The authors found that if fossil fuels had been fairly priced in 2015, global carbon emissions would have been slashed by 28%. Deaths from fossil fuel-linked air pollution would have dropped by nearly a half. Well, actually, they would have dropped much more, because if if fossil fuels were fairly priced right now, the entire economy would collapse instantly. Or about, however an economy can collapse, however instantly that might be, a few weeks. Because what would fossil fuels cost right now if they were fairly priced? $8 a gallon, $9 a gallon. I mean, people would literally just they'd lose their minds. Food prices would also skyrocket. And this is the thing that I brought up before, and Michael Rupert mentioned this in a documentary he did years ago, probably 10 or 11 years ago, that sustained high gas prices were as much a cause of the 2008 crash as, mortgages, bad mortgages, defaulted mortgages, and credit default swaps, etc. And I totally agree with him. I think that's what brought it down, because you had people that were choosing between food and gasoline to get to work. You had people choosing between paying their credit card bills and gasoline to get to work, or choosing to pay their mortgage and gasoline to get to work. And also, you had higher food prices. So people were like, oh my God, I have to buy this food and this gas to live. Everything else gets squeezed out. People got stretched out, and bam, that's what happened. And I think that is probably coming our way very soon. We're seeing gas prices rising, and I just ran across an article talking about the fact that prices are going, maybe it was a video, the prices were going to be going up even further very soon. If I can find that video, I'll bring it to y'all. But there are so many things that could collapse our economy in the next 8 months. You could have food shocks. You could have gas shocks. You could have gas prices skyrocketing. You could have more climate disasters, straining the economy, straining the budgets of states and municipalities. There's so many things could coalesce to really put us in big trouble this year, in 2019. So buckle up, hang on to your seats. Make sure you got a little bit of food and water put away somewhere just in case, or make sure you got some bug out bags or whatever it is you need to do. But this is a good year to make sure that you have at least some kind of go plan and some kind of bug out plan. Again, nothing, we may get to 2020 and, everything's fine. I have serious doubts. So that's all I have for you today. Well, let me so the next paragraph actually just reinforce what I just said. Oil, gas, and coal companies and their stooges in public office have long argued that making consumers pay for the full impacts of fossil fuel use would cripple the economy. The IMF experts call bullshit on this idea, revealing that the world would, in fact, be more prosperous. Eliminating subsidies for fossil fuels would have created global net economic welfare gains in 2015 and more than 1.3 trillion or 1.7% of global GDP, the study found. These net gains are calculated as the benefits from reduced environmental damage and higher revenue minus the losses from consumers facing higher energy prices. So just want to read that one more paragraph. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.